Well, you made me question that.
Okay. All right. So why don't we just go around and say who you are and what year you wrote, or anything else you'd like to talk about?
We need that mic.
Probably.
It's very strange for anybody watching if we don't have it.
It's just muffled over
And
there.
then there's like, ha 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 ha.
Well, they can't see it, they can just hear.
Hey, this is Raven Garrity, and I did the ride in 2017.
Alec Miller, 2017.
Sky Wildcat, 2018.
Courtney Cowan, 2018.
Marvin Cochran, original rider.
Joseph 14 and 15, and Amayi. What years? 29.
Will Chavez, 84 and 17.
Just keep it and turn it off if you'd like. It's the very smallest button you've ever seen. It's like a pin drop. Well, yeah, thank you all for coming today. I felt like I needed to show you what I've been doing. And I know a lot of you came last year, so last year it was really the results from the 2017 group. The survey, now we have 2017, 2018. So that's as much as we're going to do right now. So we have kind of 2 years of data, so that's a little bit better than last year to kind of say what trends that we've seen. So I'll just kind of go through again. I think most of you know this background stuff, but I'll kind of show you the results, kind of ask your opinion about them, and then talk about, maybe next steps. Does that sound okay? It's not focused on me. I'm just going to hang out over here because it's weird to be over there. So some of the research background on why I was interested in doing this program has to do with what we know about young adults or youth, and what is positive for their mental health and physical health. And so for Native youth, we know that the more people are connected to their culture, the better health outcomes they have, which is why I wanted to learn more about RTR, because that's kind of the base, is learning about your culture and who you are and your history. So those are those journal articles, the research that kind of demonstrates that. So, but we also know that Native youth are more likely to suffer from mental health and substance use and even physical health concerns compared to non-American Indians. So these interventions have found that when people are culturally connected, they gain leadership experience, which is one of the main goals of Cherokee Nation's RTR program. And Native youth are protected from those risk factors that other youth, Native youth experience. Again, this is more kind of what we know in the research literature. So when Native people take part in their traditional cultural activities, they're more likely to have as students better grades, improved positive mental health, reduced substance use, and improved physical health. And so being connected to your traditional culture fosters these positive relationships among peers. It decreases negative behavior and increases your bond of family, community, and tribe, which seemed to me exactly like the purpose and some of the outcomes that I had heard about from RTR. So researchers now, knowing that, are making curriculums, they're calling culture-based curriculums, to address mental health concerns, to address physical health concerns in Native communities. And these cultural-based curriculums, they incorporate cultural knowledge, traditions, and language. And they're shown to increase the motivation of these students and the involvement of the students' families in their learning. And these programs that include culture and spirituality are effective in reducing suicide and suicide thoughts, hopelessness, depression, and result in improved self-reported health. So like I feel like I have good health. Programs focusing on increasing positive resiliency factors may actually be more effective than the ones trying to decrease. So there's specific programs out there for Native youth to try to decrease depression or decrease the rate of suicidal ideation, and studies are finding that it's actually more effective to try to improve your cultural connections, your family connections. That's a little bit more effective for those outcomes. So that's the literature background, the research background. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about that? There's a lot of crunching, so I figured it was pretty good. Okay, so you all know what the main program components are, and last month with the alumni group and with some of the other program staff, we published an article, and it actually has a really big table. And so I put it up on the Facebook page, so if anybody wants to read that, you're welcome to take a look at that paper. So it's always important to remember that Eastern Band and Cherokee Nation RTR is housed in two different places, and there's somewhat similar but some specific differences between the goals of the program. So for Cherokee Nation, the two main goals are to develop leadership skills and teach participants about Cherokee Nation history, culture, and language. And Eastern Band is to teach participants about Cherokee history, culture, and language in ways they can be healthier. So what I did is just to track the outcomes and try to make sure I looked at, is each program meeting their goals? Which is why most of you who have done a survey, why it took maybe 6 hours out of your life, which I appreciate, but they were really big goals. So just a background of what we've done so far. In 2013, we started planning with the program staff. What is it that we want to learn about this program? Everyone talks so highly of it, and people have these kind of anecdotal experiences, but how can we get something a little bit more objective? So the first thing we did was invited the original writers, the 1984, and at that time also the 2015 cohort. We did a reunion kind of style with the 84s and a focus group with the 2015, and just asked them, how was this ride? How has this program affected your life? And so we got kind of 4 main themes: physical health improved, emotional and behavioral health, and social and family, peers, and also cultural. So again, the reason those of you who have done the survey, the questions were the way they were, was based on what those 84s and 2015s told us. So then in 2017, we started doing the surveys, and so all 2017 and all 2018 writers were asked to do the survey. And in January was the very last data collection, and so we're done with the survey. So I'm here to tell you what happened. So you usually have to have these research questions, like, what is the question you want to learn about? So it's, do y'all have improved health and well-being during, after, and beyond the program? Actually, those numbers are not correct, but those of you who did a survey actually completed 325 questions around those 4 different areas. Over the 2 years, so these numbers up top are not correct. So in the box, don't worry about those. That was just last year's. Here are the correct numbers. So 35 people completed the surveys. This is Cherokee Nation Eastern Band 2017, 2018 folks. Because Cherokee Nation has some more riders, we were a little bit more representative. 63% of the study population versus Eastern Band's 37%. The average age was 26 years old, but ranged from 16 to 50. I'm not sure if I added 2018s in, so it might be a little bit different. There was a little bit more female than males. About a quarter of folks had a high school diploma, a quarter had a college degree, 10% had a degree past college. 42% of y'all work full-time, and 32% were in school, and a lot probably do both, so you guys are very impressive. As far as income, so we ask these questions because people want to know about socioeconomic status. Sometimes these particular variables relate to outcomes, and so when we do analysis later down the road, you say you hold these constant. So you can say that, things like income, they're not related to the results that we're seeing. So that's just wanted to explain why we ask these questions. So 34% of folks, about a third, make less than $19,000 a year, and 48% had an income of $40,000 or higher. 89% of folks lived within the jurisdictional boundaries, Cherokee Nation, or the Qualla boundary. Those are the demographics. And I said this last year, I'll kind of say it again. We had more people, so we had what they call more power to detect differences between groups. A lot of you are shaking your heads, so you must be in stats classes right now. But what I did was a t-test, and so essentially what that means in fancy terms is we had averages. We just averaged what people's answers were, and that's how we came up with these statistics. We still don't have a great number of participants, but we're better than last year. We have a lot of measures, which isn't great either for this kind of statistic. And we didn't do a random sample. So usually people are like, well, people self-selected into this group. We didn't have a control group. I won't get into stats, but these are things that people could talk about as far as concerns with the design of the study. And I did say this last year, to get statistical significance, it is really difficult with low numbers, which we have about the minimum. People want at least 40, so we're pretty close to having what people call a minimum number to not be too angry with you, to report these. But you'll see we have a lot of statistical significance, which leads me to believe that these results are powerful. But if you think about one person, I think I put the slide up. If everyone weighed 200 pounds, the average of everyone would be 200, and if one person weighed 500, it would change the numbers a lot. So that's why if you have low numbers, it's not great. You want more numbers, so you can average things a little bit more effectively. Okay, that's the boring stats class. Sorry.
So you're only averaging 17 and 18, 15 and 84 were...
No, 15 and 84 were just focus groups.
Okay.
So, 15 and 84 never did any surveys. We just sat down and recorded you all and said, can you tell us about how this program affected your life? And some people said, like, I get along with my family better. So that's why there's a family conflict scale that we check, So everything that was told to me in that kind of research, which is just talking, is how I came up with the surveys. Does that help? Okay. So now I'll go through those 4 specific domains that we looked at. And does anybody want to try to guess how any of these changed? If they changed or if they didn't change any of these areas? Like, I guess I should say, if you remember, we collected data 4 times. So in January, right before anyone started or right as people were starting. So that's what we call a baseline. The program hasn't affected anyone yet. Then we did it right before you all left. In May, we did another data collection right when you returned, early June. And then we did a 6-month follow-up, so until January. So I guess my question is, do you think when people return from the program and beyond, 6 months later, do you guys think that there was any physical health changes? Weight? Did people eat more or less fruit, drink more or less sodas, exercise more, feel self-efficacy for activity, like feel like you knew how to exercise now? Any guesses?
It's all positive.
You think it's all positive?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a drop last year? As soon as everyone got back, their exercise dropped a lot.
I feel like it was better than the baseline, but I mean, after the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yep, have pretty good memories. And actually, for weight, we didn't even see this last year. So if there's an arrow, that means there's a statistically significant result. So statistics say it's a meaningful, powerful result. Last year, when we just had 1 year, weight actually increased significantly by the 6-month follow-up. I think I showed you a slide with the weight. I don't have that now. But right now, when y'all came back, weight was down. BMI, there was no change. People ate more fruit before the ride and during the ride, but didn't keep it up significantly 6 months later, after you came back 6 months later. And no one was interested in eating more vegetables at any time. After the ride, compared to before people started, people ate a little bit less fatty and sweet food. The soda was kind of interesting. This wasn't as strong when we had 1 year, but so for every part of the ride and 6 months follow-up, people drank less sodas.
Please do. You actually talked about it today.
Were you?
There was one, we had our break day, and we were about to go to bed, and Trey had 2 orange pops, and we chugged them both before bed in the secret of our room. And I was like, Trey, we can't drink pop, man. He goes, it's not pop, it's juice. I was like, okay, Trey. But, I mean, I drink more of those pops than I did before.
Still you do?
Yeah, I think it was just the act of cutting it out. And Sarah wouldn't let us.
But it's interesting what habits can stick and what don't.
Yeah. I'm aware of how much pop or anything that I would eat, whereas before I wouldn't even think about it. Now I'm just wow, that was a lot of pop for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, I just even if it doesn't change, I feel like something to look at would maybe be the awareness of what you're doing to yourself. I don't know. I feel like that would be good. Yeah.
I do too, but I actually realized hey, this is actually terrible for me.
But I health conscious before, so I didn't really. It's about the same. I don't drink pop every day. I drink probably maybe 1 or 2 a week.
Mm-hmm. Might be hungry.
So I'm in the car for almost 3 hours a day, so I'm like, get one.
I drink water all the time. I get getting tired of it. I need some flavor.
What's done for me as far as pop goes is it affects your workout. If you're drinking pop before you work out, you're not going to do it well.
Oh, yeah.
So, Sarah mentioned that, and it's stuff for me.
I don't cramp my legs and cramp my stuff. So if I'm moving and training, I definitely don't drink pop for
This is in your mouth. You can tell in your mouth if your mouth's a lot drier and stuff, and you're snapping around and stuff.
Maybe you
He had to
are.
give an example.
I forgot to tell you all to use a mic.
Oh.
But
Give me some
You know.
we'll just keep it on over there or something. Let's see, where are we at? So yeah, you all were right about the exercising. So there was questions about different kinds of activity, this moderate versus vigorous, and people obviously from baseline to before you left did a lot more exercising, but it didn't keep up post ride. It didn't keep up 6 months follow up. Obviously, it's a large amount of exercise. But I kind of wondered, and I have the actual numbers here. I thought it would be still more than baseline, though. What about, so your soda eating or soda drinking habits, they stayed 6 months later, but what about your exercise habits?
I think like with soda, there's like a ready alternative. Like you can cut out soda and or pop and drink water or tea or something instead. But the accountability of like going to practice every weekend and having a whole team and a time and a trainer holding you accountable, it's hard to have that self-efficacy to.
It was a lot easier when we were all doing it as a group, like together, you know.
Riding a bike by yourself afterwards sucks.
Yeah.
Well, it's scary too.
Yeah.
And then that 6 month follow up is in January too, so it's cold.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point.
So maybe weather related.
Is it different for Eastern Band because they have those biking trails? If you look at just Eastern Band.
Just one moment. Would you grab a mic too?
Because riding in town is hard.
And they always post of their group rides. Like they do that all the time.
January in Eastern Band, I imagine, is even harder than here to be riding a bike. EBCA.
Well, I can. This is on, I think.
It is on. Okay.
I consistently rode my bike after the ride in 17, and then last summer also. So until it got cold, I rode my bike. So.
And there's not like a transition to going indoors back to Marcoma or anything when it gets cold?
I don't like going to Marcoma. I'd rather work out outside if I can, if it's not too cold.
And then not everyone lives here. Like indoor, there's not going to be a gym to go to.
Yeah.
Every time I go drive halfway across the state to go to work.
That's true.
No, I don't need it. You all just keep it.
Okay. You can just talk.
You just keep it.
Hey.
So it sounds like also like you all learned to exercise using a bicycle, so that's what you're thinking about doing. Like it didn't transition to going to the gym or taking up running or something else, for example. It was like you wanted to ride your bike still only if the weather was good.
I think it just depends on the person.
Yeah, I was working on
Mari, I think, was starting to run.
Yeah.
Running after. I started doing Metcon at Marcoma.
When you got back?
Not exactly when I got back, though.
Well,
It took a couple months, and then I started back. Like, I just missed working out.
Okay.
You know, so, but.
Mine dropped. I was already working out a lot before riding, so while we were training and stuff, I stopped because I was so wrecked from riding on the weekends.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to it. So mine just dropped.
My Amari was a basketball player, so, you know, and then I played ball, so I was used to working out anyway. So.
You already had that. It wasn't a new habit.
Yeah. The biking was different, but everything else.
That's the thing, like biking as far as like endurance. Like running's a lot harder than biking.
It's just more fun too.
Yeah, biking's a lot easier on your joints, it's a lot more fun, you get to cruise down hills and stuff. Whereas like running
And just like comfortability to like go where you do work out. Like, I know, like, you probably have more friends at Marcoma. Like, you know,
Yeah,
people
I've
when
been
you
there
go
for a while, so yeah.
And like Amari, like, I mean, her family runs, like, they're athletes. That's what they do. Yeah, and like, I mean, I know for me, like, it's like just recently, like, we've started actually going to the gym, and like, I just feel like I have somebody to go with. Whereas, you know, if somebody doesn't, I feel like you're probably less likely to go. Yeah.
I think a lot of us had accountability.
Yeah.
We were keeping each other accountable for about like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We just fell off the wagon.
Fell off the wagon. Well, actually, so Cherokee Nation, if we look at them separately, it looks the same as what's on the screen. Moderate, vigorous, and total increased at first, and then nothing from the middle when people returned a couple weeks after they returned. But actually, one is approaching one is it's not super strong, but it is significant. Cherokee Nation vigorous physical activity 6 months later. But Eastern Band is not significant. So I think when we average them, no need to comparisons. We average them together. I think that'd be the collective experience. But again, if we are comparing, Cherokee Nation has like a stronger effect because we had more people, but it wasn't strong enough to average for everybody. So that's interesting. I'm going to just kind of keep that in the back of my mind because it sounds like both of you, Courtney and Sky, gave examples of you already had habits that kind of got you, like when you finished the program, you kept up with those habits, but no one talked about new habits like they did with the soda. Or Will kind of did, or sorry.
No, you're good.
Is that?
Well, yeah, I guess what Sarah said stuck with me about talk before a workout won't make you as efficient. So that stayed with me all the time after that.
I was just thinking, me and Kelsey had talked about, because we were athletes in high school too, and we were talking about it. And we're like, after you work out like that, like being on the bike, I could definitely could see it like more vigorous than moderate, because then when you get back home in your mindset, you can still do that. You can still ride 60 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then you do it, and it sucks really bad, and it hurts, and then you quit for like a week, so it hurts. And so me and Kelsey have done that multiple times, where we used to like run cross country. So we're like, oh, okay, like we go out and run 2 miles, come back, and like not run for 2 weeks.
It's really hard to get back
Yeah,
going.
but because in your mind you think you can do it, but your body's like, no, don't want into that. So we do that quite a bit.
But then then it's not, is it just because you're sore, or is it because you're sort of like...
I mean, it's discouraging too when you can't do what your body used to do.
And I mean, we were working out for the ride. Like this, when you're working out, we're not doing it's for our health, but we're not preparing for a ride. We're not, doing something like this ride was. We were
Just
all
your health, no big deal.
motivated. Motivated to work out because we wanted to do this ride. So
And to
it's
not
hard
be,
to work out
like
after the
holding
ride.
somebody back, I think, is like another big reason. Like, you're doing it for other people, like not just different, like you don't want to just do it for you. That was my motivation.
Yeah, you got somebody in front of you and had somebody behind you.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be the one to cause other people to have to wait for you, to have to...
Well, I think it translates into other areas, like not to branch off too much, but we were talking the other day about like when it transitioned in my mind from like the actions I take on the bike can hurt me versus the actions I make on a bike can hurt other people. Like whenever I saw, like whenever Macy kind of messed up and then Shelby hit her tire and then Will and Gaia got hurt. Or whenever I was in Fayetteville and I messed up and Gaia got hurt because I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a sense of like, my actions have a real impact on the people around me.
And that's what I told the group when we got back and we had to do when we sat with the chief and he asked this question. I mentioned to him that I worked out on my own a lot in the beginning, just climbing bleachers or whatever. because I didn't want to be a burden to the rest of the group. I was thinking about the group. I wanted to be able to keep up and take care of myself rather than having them take care of me on the trail. So,
Sure.
so that was another thing about for me was thinking about the group and not I didn't want to let them down. So.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jen felt that way really
Oh,
strongly. Yeah.
Jen,
Yeah, before the ride, she had a couple like little breakdowns, like scared, like for her, she didn't want to hold us back. But I think when she finally, like the Eastern band, realized, oh hey, these people are older than me and they're doing it fine. She done way better than she ever did in practice on this whole ride. But that must be a worry for especially the older ones. I feel like they don't want to hold you back. I remember Jen, I said that too.
They had to tell her to start working out.
Oh,
She was way too much on herself.
She was awesome. She was awesome.
Yeah.
She was 62.
About 63 now.
So this is a little bit of a question aside. My kind of my health researcher brain comes on when I hear you all talk because the RTR is kind of in some ways a safe training place to learn these things about being Cherokee, about taking care of one another, etc. But it seems like the people who started it, the purpose was for it to be applied to your life when you come home. And with the 84s, we saw that in the focus group. People taught their children things they learned from this program. And as you guys were talking, I was just imagining, isn't everything you're saying, wouldn't that be the same for your family and how you take care of your body? Wouldn't you want to not, and maybe this is a question maybe 84s can help with, because I don't think anyone else here has kids. Sorry to make it so personal, but as a parent, you think about and you're responsible to other people in a way, and the things that you were saying, I thought they could be applied exactly the same way. I want to do my best. I want to be there for my family. I want to make sure that I can be around for them when they graduate high school, for example. So I don't know. That's just has anyone ever thought about what you just said in a way that it actually applies to your life and your family and the people that you love versus just I want to so bad to not disappoint them, so I worked out to make sure I wasn't the last one. 84s? Do you mind? Sorry, you can say you don't want to talk about it.
I do because I didn't say anything earlier about the additional exercise or doing something else, but I walk a lot at the Heritage Center or at the Power Grounds. And that's for me. I'm diabetic. And if I don't do anything, it's going to get worse. So that's my motivation to stay around a little longer for my kids. And I don't have grandkids, but at least for my kids and my family. So that's my prime motivation for walking. I don't run anymore. My knees are just shot. I just walk, and it helps a lot.
Thank you.
I think it does teach healthy relationships. How to be a good teammate and an extension family member. I think somebody asked me the other day, I can't remember, maybe Lily or did you get that second family feeling or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, it's my second family, And yeah, that second family thing. And I don't know, I don't have kids, so I don't know if I'm going to apply it to my family, but I would say it teaches people how to have healthy relationships.
In the focus groups, when people talked about relationships, a lot of folks, the non-84 group, they talked about peers. In the 84 group, they talked about passing what they learned down to their children. So it just seems, generation differences, what you're focusing on.
And it could be, this is something that sticks with you too. So it could be something when you do have kids or whatever, 20 years down the line, those things will still connect with you.
Yeah, if they thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, 84, sorry to put you on the spot, there's only two of you here, but It sounded like, I mean, there were several times I had quotes of people saying, like, I wanted to teach my children this because of what I learned on the ride specifically.
Was that was from when 84 and 52 posted, right?
It was done in 2015.
Yeah, so they were already older though, right? Like 84.
I'm not older. They're in the room.
No, I meant like. Well, I'm just saying because like 15.
It's like a 30-year
Yeah.
reflection, 32-year reflection.
That's what I'm saying is they were older, so they had families and
age
stuff.
they were on the ride.
Yeah. So they were more focused on passing it down, which none of us have kids, as you said. So we're not really thinking about that yet.
I would be checking with us 30 years from now.
Yeah.
I'll check in 30 years.
Yeah. Just keep getting me, and I'll come back.
I mean, it's something we still talk about it to this day. Like, we'll get together and we'll talk about, like, these things that still resonates with us. And we learned new stuff all the time just by talking to each other.
I mean, even though we weren't on the same ride together, I feel a connection with y'all.
Yeah.
Because we went through pretty much the same thing. I mean, of course we had different
experiences.
Yeah.
But
as far as like that healthy relationships, it kind of goes back to that, I guess. Like the connectedness.
So it's just like the trail. I mean, the trail. You know, you can say this day. You know, we ended at this place, and you can like share in that moment. Like, oh, do you remember that park? Or you know, it's across years, it's really cool because it does. Not only are you knitted together with a team, you end up getting knitted together with a larger community. And I think it's gonna be really cool. 20 years from now, even now there's a ton of us. We just need to get to that critical mass where we, I don't know, have that consistent community. But
someone asked me, I think it was one of the reviewers for the article, like, what is the format? Has it ever changed? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost, there's been lots of changes to the exact route. I've tried to get closer. 84 has tried to do like 1,000 miles, I think, and
we did. Probably more than that. Like metal bikes.
Yeah, metal bikes and
1,100.
1,100. Yeah, and that's a much different experience than the 2018, but nevertheless, there seems to be a lot in common, which gets to what you're talking about, Brian.
Well, I listened to Will talk about the 84 ride, something I heard him say a lot. He enjoyed going in 2018 because he was able to actually enjoy it. Whereas he felt like he was trying to get through it the first time. I feel like I've heard you say that. And I think it's because there was a lot of, having people scout it out and we can already have our path to
All right, we've gotten to pretty much all the topics on the first slide. So that's good. Anyone want to guess about, so now we're in the emotional health, things like anxiety, depression, stress, anger, my co-presenters sharing. Yeah. I also asked you all about these things that Indigenous people experience more than other people. Discrimination, historical trauma, and this is measured through, do you think about things like the loss of your land due to colonization, due to removal? I mean, that's one of the questions. To think about loss of your language, that kind of thing. And the microaggressions are a kind of discrimination that occurs it looks less outright than discrimination. Like 84s have some good examples of outright discrimination. Actually, other ones you guys really do too. Some people like giving the finger or not allowing you into certain stores, or there was some sort of skinhead situation with throwing rocks in the 84 group. Those are discriminations. An example of a microaggression, actually, also in the paper from the 84 group was, oh, you all, you're so wonderful, can I take a picture with you? And then someone said, sure, you can take a picture with us. And then the woman taking the picture said, oh, you're Indians, right? Kind of like that feeling like, it doesn't quite feel right, like but nothing outright racist was said. So these are things that are found to relate to, for Indigenous people, are more likely to have depression, anxiety, and those things happen. And yeah, the 84 group, you guys told me about pretty much all those things happening just on the ride. So any guesses about when y'all returned and the 6-month follow-up, how people's social and emotional behavioral health were?
I feel like they're probably positive upon return, but I almost feel like 6 months down the road, like it kind of, like, yeah, like depression was higher. Like I know for me, like my anxiety's not as bad, but depression, like definitely, just because you feel so far removed from like the best experience of your life, and then now it's just like the best worst thing to happen to you because you never get that again. Like, you know, you'll never be with those people like the same way. And like I feel like, I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of people from my group and they feel that way. I don't know if they put it on their surveys because you know, but
that's another story too. Good point.
Yeah.
Like mine was the opposite. I had more of the depression stuff right after, and then I got better after the 6 months.
For the same reasons, like missing everybody or other things?
Well, kind of. I guess it was because it was just so like schedule based. And then after I got back, I was just like, let's get back to my schedule, let's go to work and do all this other stuff. And I wasn't having anybody there like tell me what to do. Kind of, I had to like do my own stuff. Then I got back used to my old schedule, and then I was fine now.
So much more peaceful on the ride for me. I don't know if anybody else, but I mean, you have more bills, work,
I don't want to come home.
I literally
Food.
did not want to come home at all. Yeah. It was weird. I thought I would be wanting to come home, like, missing everybody, but I did not want to leave, come back anyways. It was, and then being back, I felt like I had been stressed. Like, it was nice to be home for like a week or two, but I didn't know what to do with myself. And then reality comes in, and you're back to your
So it was both like missing friends, but it sounds like also like you had to go back to life stresses.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you have a routine for 6 months of the year, and then all of a sudden it's just done. Like, like
Cold turkey.
yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I've heard several people mention though, like about the daily hassles, like things that used to really would like rile you up, or things that really affected you. You're like, okay, that's not that bad. Like it could be worse. There could be other things happening. Like so for me, it's not that I downplay things now, but I realize that how much better and worse there is out there, and that it's not something that's going to stay around forever. Like it's just a momentary thing.
Handle things a little bit better. Maybe. Well, survey says.
You're all wrong.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. They're all wrong. Okay, that's kind of hard to read. So everything looks like it shifted down just a little bit. So actually, and I always think this is interesting. He's happy with the results. He's clapping. There's a lot of significant results, and social and emotional behavioral health is not a goal of either of the programs. I know. So, so apparently you all were still stressed before you went on the ride. And then post and then follow up, it was actually significantly reduced. And it remained that way all through January. For anxiety went down, and depression went down. Those first two categories. So from the baseline to when you went to the ride, it went down significantly, and it stayed down significantly from when you returned. But I'm sorry, that's just for anxiety. Depression, it's was reduced compared to the baseline. So that's that January to January comparison. So yeah, that is a little different than some of the experiences you all shared. But again, this is on average. So anger was an interesting one. Someone in the 84 group talked about how these, like, as a young person having these experiences of anger but after the ride they felt less angry. I never thought to kind of think about that. I know people, do anger management, but I hadn't really thought about that as an important mental health issue. But it turns out that it's something that was significantly changed. Like, not that you talked about, being angry, but you talked a little bit about handling things better. And I wonder if that might have something to do with.
I mean, it's when you take account for like your emotions and you realize that you have control over them too. Like everything, well, not everything, but a lot of it is your mindset. Like on the ride, if you get in the mindset that you can't do it, like it's going to be a hard day. It's going to be a really hard day. But when you learn that how you set the pace for yourself in the morning is how your day is going to go, I feel like it really plays into day-to-day life.
Right. As far as anger goes, I don't, on the ride, and we say this before they start riding every year, this, the training itself will test your patience, because you're going to have to go as slow as the slowest person riding, or there's going to be flats, or something else is going to happen where you have to wait in the sun, and you're hot and you're wanting to move on and keep going. So I'm not saying that's anger, but I'm just saying you learn patience. And so if you're an impatient person and you get angry, I think that helps you on the ride. You learn to be patient with other people and situations. So I think that's a positive there. Just you have to be with other people and just go as fast as they're going. You can't go off on your own. It's not a race. It's a team. So that's what I think about a lot, is the patience part.
That's a good point. In the focus groups, people talked a lot about patience and where they learned it from too. There was like 3 examples I remember. One is learning it from watching someone else be really patient with someone that everyone was calling difficult. But just watching someone else be gentle and caring despite you feeling impatient. Other people talked about thinking about the experience of their ancestors and thinking about one was impatient when there was an elderly woman or a pregnant woman. Your job was to help them, and like hearing those stories, kind of putting in perspective. Those are things that I remember as far as like how people learn to be patient.
Yeah, we on the 84 ride, we camped almost every night, and so it took patience to get those tents set up. And in the morning, you're exhausted because you didn't get much sleep. It might have been too hot to sleep, so you're having patience with each other, taking the tents down that you barely slept in. So those kind of experiences, I think, helped me over the years after that, and a lot of lessons. I took a lot of lessons from the 84 ride. I was only 17 at the time, but I still retained a lot of things from those, and just being around like people like Marvin and other people that were on the ride, and the elders that were with us. Just watching them, how they reacted to stressful situations, helped a lot too. I'm the elder now, so I try to keep that in mind when I'm out there. I rode with them last weekend one time, and it helps if you stay positive. It helps them too. So.
Tangent, but just talking about like learning from watching others, like the different staff who were there to help, like there to support us, the different ways they strove to support us. Some of them
better than others.
Yeah. And it was because, I don't know, I think some of them were more invested in like us as individuals and as a team, and it was really cool to see people care about, like, people that didn't even know you from the first day, but like 3, 4, 5 days in, you felt like that person could be your mom, taking care of you. And so I just really appreciated that part of it. People loved us, took care of us while we were out there.
One more thing, as far as the lessons go and the observations and things you learn from the ride, I think it affects the staff too out there. Some of the staff that go want to do it again over and over. We've had it. We have a medic who's gone like 3 times or twice now, and he wants to go again this year. He wants to do the entire ride,
We have staff that's gone before that want to do it consistently now or want to help out in the springtime during training. So the ride not only affects the riders, it affects the staff too. So that's pretty neat, I think.
So one other thing I wanted to measure is positive mental health, and it's actually all three arrows that are going up. And that's because we always measure what's going wrong, especially with Native people and mental health. So that was the one that asked you, in the past month, how often have you felt happy, interested in life, like you have something important to contribute to society, that people are good, that you like parts of your personality, you have warm and trusting relationships with others, that your life has a sense of direction and meaning. So this is kind of a fairly newly used mental health construct, but we know actually that Native people compared to non-Native people have more positive mental health, but Native people also have more depression and anxiety, so we're kind of on those two ends of the spectrum. On average, we're actually happier, have more positive mental health, but when we do have challenges, experience depression at higher rates, if that makes any sense. But it's kind of neat to see here that this is what resilience is. This is what gets you through tough times, feeling like your life has meaning, for example. And so I was excited to see that result. The next one is an interesting one. So that microaggressions, in the paper that we just published, I actually wrote out that transcript of like, someone told you guys, like an interviewer was like, how do you guys have bikes? Don't you still live in teepees? And like, how do you have jeans and things like that? And it's kind of a funny conversation because you all kind of kept going on like, yeah, I got like a 3-bedroom teepee. And
With running water.
right, with running water. It was kind of a fun conversation, which is why I put it in the paper. But like, that's a microaggression. But that's how someone who maybe has positive mental health or knows how to cope with that, when someone says that, you don't take it to heart and it doesn't lead to depression, for example. So what was interesting is at each of the time points, compared to baseline, you perceived that you had less microaggressions and they affected you less throughout your life, or throughout the RTR. It was significant each time. Anyone have any thoughts about that?
I think that it goes down in this because I feel like when you're more sure of yourself, you don't take things as hard. They might have still happened, but you don't pick up on those microaggressions because you're not looking for those. You're not looking for people to find flaws in you because you're sure of yourself and you know what you are and what you stand for and what you've done has meaning. And so you can stand behind what you've done. Like today, it's so crazy. I was actually talking to a consultant at my work today, and he's from New York, and he has no experience with tribes. And so he was asking about the casinos is how we got talking about it. And I was telling him about the ride, and he said, you could tell he was kind of like, didn't know how to phrase the question. He's like, so, like, do you still live in, like, reservations? And, like, do you have, like, CPs? And, like, really, like trying, like, he didn't want to offend me, but he also had no idea. So I didn't take that to heart that he didn't know. And he was like, well, do you think that's willful ignorance, or do you think it's just people's outright ignorance that they don't know? And so we had a really great conversation, but I mean, those things could be picked up as microaggressions, but I took it up as his just ignorance. He didn't know. But I was sure of myself and I knew my position, so it was easy to say something back in a positive way. Like, I didn't downplay that he didn't know. I just confronted it and educated him to our stance.
Makes sense.
So like in my apartment, I have my bike hanging on the wall. And so people who don't know what the ride is, they'll ask me, well, where'd you get your bike? I was like, oh, I got it from Cherokee Nation. And a lot of times, sometimes the conversation goes further, it doesn't. But like a lot of times it's sometimes like, oh, Cherokee Nation gave you a free bike. What'd you do? Like, sign up for it or ride 10 miles or something. If they don't know what it was, they think it was just a handout. That's that microaggression piece that the assumption that it was because it came from Cherokee Nation, it was handed to me. And so then, but like in that, it opens up that conversation for me to be like, no, actually, it's pretty significant. Like, I rode 950 miles alongside my peers, retracing the trail our ancestors walked. And then they feel guilty for making that assumption. They're like, you rode how many miles? How long did that take you? You know? So I think another part of it is like understanding the ignorance, and then also the amount of empathy that I feel like we saw while we were on the ride. The amount of random people that broke down, like 2 or 3 women at different stops were like crying on behalf of their ancestors who did wrong by our ancestors. And I'm like, homegirl, like, you didn't do anything. Like, you couldn't, you couldn't do anything about it. I'm glad that, you recognize the reality of it. But I think for me that meant a lot too, though, that there was random people out there who, felt connected to it and felt some sort of empathy. And so I think it gives me more understanding for people when they do say something ignorant. That like on the other side, I know there's a lot of empathetic people out there too. So I don't know.
So just click on the person. So if they're trying to be mean, or if they're just shut down.
The last person it was Marshall.
Yeah, his neighbor. He was over all the time. Didn't know that he did the ride.
Yeah, he comes over like all the time.
Well, go ahead.
You already have the mic. Go ahead.
What I was just going to say is, what Raven said about just the ignorance part. She did as much as she can to educate this person. We have our kids that come in every year to this program, and they're ignorant about a lot of what happened, and it's not necessarily their fault. But if they're ignorant about it, if they're not knowledgeable about what happened, how can you expect most of the population to know much about it also? Yeah. And I got slaps in the face, not literally, but when Brian Macy and I went to the museum in Vintonville, the Native Museum there, and presented about the ride, we had about 8 or 9 people there, and I assumed they knew what the Trail of Tears was and what the background on it was, what happened. I shouldn't have done that. I never had gone out of the state to present, to non-Cherokees, and it slapped me in the face like, but these people don't know anything about this. So we had to back up and give some background before we could actually make our presentation. So yeah, there's a lot of ignorance out there.
Education system in any way.
Yeah.
It's something Bob did, because we had that presentation in Wisconsin, which that's a lot further than Arkansas. So.
But yeah, that was Native people, right?
It was Native.
Yeah, well, not all of them. Some of them were just like their first time being there.
A lot of them understood, but there was definitely a few people out there.
Well, if they were Native, but it doesn't mean they know about Cherokee, like our trail or anything like that. So we just asked, like, oh, you guys know about this?
Yeah, but we assumed that they would know.
Yeah, like,
and then they're like, wait, what trail?
The SAGE company?
Society for American Indian Government Employees.
You all presented there.
Yeah, because I was sponsoring this year from
I'm trying to think. I'm already going.
Yeah, well, I want to go too.
I was just gonna say that I'm surprised by that. Just because I know some of the people on my ride, they're actually interested in learning more, and whenever they do see those things, they get mad about it. And whereas before, they just feel like, well, what's wrong with that? What's the big deal? I'd explain it to them, but now they recognize those things and they talk about it. And I know for me, it just now I'm just tired and I'm just done with that kind of stuff. And I don't keep it in. I'm not empathetic towards their ignorance at all. And so it's just, for me, it's the opposite effect. So that's just kind of surprising, I guess. But
I wonder. It sounds like to me there's 2 different ways of handling it. But you're talking about knowing more, maybe having less patience. And I guess there's the how you deal with it outright and how it affects you internally. So I think one of the concerns would be that Native people experience microaggressions and discrimination more than other people. So it's likely to go up, and then we're concerned about how that affects people's mental health. But then there's also what happens even if it's happening at a high rate. Then how do you handle it? because some people can, tell someone off and then their mental health is fine, and someone could do nothing and it could be festering inside, and either of those might relate to health concerns. So it's I don't know if it's necessarily a good or bad thing about how you deal with it now. And I might just move on to the bottom one, which is historical trauma. And this one is what we saw last time. And it was, how often do you... He likes being towed around in boxes. I can't explain it really. Let me pull these questions up, but this is, if you remember, how often do you think? And I think this is what you learned more. So you're talking about people who learned more, and so they're more upset about it in a way. So this was, that's such generational. Just, how often do you have thoughts about, again, the loss of land?
I feel like a big part of that's your personality too, though. Like, some people will never be that aggressive, like, hard stance. Like me, I will never confront somebody about something like that. It might, like, upset me at the time, but then I will never react to somebody like that. It's not in me to do that. And then for somebody else, it is.
Yeah. For me, I know it's like I have to. I have to say something.
And for me, it would make me more upset if I did have to say something. I can't do it.
Yeah. Right.
And
It's
so
a good point. It's different.
It's just personality differences.
So this is like loss of land, loss of language, loss of spiritual ways, loss of family ties due to boarding at residential schools, loss of families from tribal lands due to government relocation. So this is pretty much things when you're in the program, it seems like you're certainly thinking about and seeing on a daily basis. I think last year, when we presented, we just had a smaller group. It was actually significant, which means people thought about historical trauma more. I think it was across the board. But this one, actually, it didn't turn up in that 6-month follow-up. So the very bottom.
You mean 18 years?
With them combined. The combined. Yeah. So something happened where it was clearly people were thinking about it more in training. Obviously, you're having your Saturday and Sundays conversations about this content. And then on the ride, but 6 months later, people are not thinking about historical trauma more than they did before. Yeah.
I think I started recognizing something that people in general, like, I know this is kind of, before I did the ride, like in college, people would always be like, "You're Pocahontas, blah, blah, blah," and it never really bothered me. And then, after the ride, I get that when at work, people are like, "Have people ever told you look like Pocahontas?" But I'm not meaning it, like, I'm not that aggressive or like, I don't take it like, I don't take it like that. I just go, I've got it before. I just turn around. Like, it of course bothers me, but it's like, at the same time, it's not in my personality. Yeah. But I know I pick up on more things now, but I'm not the confrontational person. I'm not that person. I feel like I don't know enough still to even try to fight with someone about stuff, I guess you could say. But when it comes to it, like, I recognize more things. I read more things on the internet about more Native issues or discriminations and stuff like that. But I don't physically have an opinion, I guess, on it. I just kind of brush it off when it gets told to me, I guess. I don't know. But I do recognize it way more than I used to, like, ever.
So for
it never bothered me before, but now it does. 2018,
for those in that group, it stayed significant 6 months later. Yeah. And let's see if there was a location. So you might be, there doesn't seem to be a difference by location and tribe, though.
A couple weekends ago, story time, I went up to Tulsa, and my friend is dating this girl who's from like Florida. And I was talking to her about how the place where the gathering place is in Tulsa was originally Creek land that was allotted to an allottee, and over time that land was swindled away from that family, and they put the gathering place there. And so I was talking to her about it, and she just like sweeping statement was just like, well, it was all native land once. And I'm like, I think interacting with the ride and interacting with real places and knowing like the historical documented history of how policies were made to take land, like that is a fact, and the fact that she's just like, well, it was all native once. And it's like, but this one, like, this one at least has a documented history where you can see where they slowly took it away. And it's like, she didn't want to even hear that point. And to me, that was aggravating because it's like, we went to Red Clay. We know that was the historical capital, and it's not anymore. That land was taken away by an act of law, like by a treaty. And so I want to talk to her, and I have the information to talk to her, but she just shut down. She didn't want to talk about it. And so that, for me, is that historical trauma piece, is that now I'm more informed about the traumas. And so when people want to brush it off, like it's not in it's written down. It's not like I'm just telling a story. Like, these are documented actions. And I want to be able to be like, no, like, can we just sit and talk for a minute about how this is documented and how this was taken away slowly over time? And she just wasn't interested. And I think for me, it's just like that you're more informed about. It's not just like that the land is gone. It's that how it was taken. It's like knowing more of the details.
So there's these theories about when you are learning, especially around history, and of course they're not really with Native people very much, so I think they'd be even stronger. But when you find out about something that happened in history, like a social unjust thing that happened, people, like, your first emotion, depending on who you are, it could be sadness or anger, but then it kind of, then it levels out, and it seemed like in the focus groups it was helpful to hear, like, the first time I learned about whatever it was, like, it seems like everyone has something that they learned about, that they saw, that just like kind of really meant something to them and increased their knowledge, but there was a feeling attached to it. And I always think about the 84 group. There's a pretty strong reaction to what happened when y'all went to Andrew Jackson's grave. Like, it sounded like emotions and behaviors, out of anger, and justly so. But it sounds also like that doesn't stay. Like, it doesn't stay at that peak of when you first learn whatever that thing is that meant something to you. And I don't know if I'm on the right track or not. Does anyone have any thoughts about that process of learning and how it affected you?
Well, I was going to say, in regards to that and the historical trauma, our kids now, when they go into these classrooms to train for the ride, they're not getting the Cliff Notes version of the Trail of Tears or the sanitized version anymore. They're getting Buttrick's diary. They're getting the stories of people dying in the cold, starving to death, getting here after removal about this time of year and starving to death or dying from trauma that they got on the trail with no shelter here in the cold. It was horrible when there was nothing here when they got here for shelter, and then the food they were given was usually not edible. So, I mean, they're getting these details now, and so they're more knowledgeable about the traumas, about what happened. And then on the ride, I think of Trey when we presented together in Greasy a few weeks ago. He told the people this night, and I was proud of Trey because he really spoke a lot that night. But you run into mass graves in Tennessee and Kentucky and Illinois, and Missouri, so you start seeing these on the ride or seeing these places, and it's personalized. You finally saw it yourself. So I think that's what we carry too. That's part of the historical trauma that you gathered there.
And part of the learning too is you realize kind of about people have talked about what they feel about this, like, betrayal of the United States government, and so finding out again that your president did these things to you. Or for example, the 84 group, I remember talked a lot about what is in the history books is very different. Like realizing that things were not that long ago and that people owned land, had very nice houses. People weren't living, in these barbaric ways that our history books want us to make it think was a very long time ago. It was very similar to something that could happen today. I remember that's what like the 84 group talked about that. Like we had plantations, we had wealth, we had farms, we had schools, we had all these things, and people were walked out, things that we have today. And so that was like this first time people were feeling kind of like betrayed by what they've learned, by the United States as well. And I can imagine that first response would be like, I'm pretty angry about this. I don't know. Any thoughts about that experience or any of those feelings come up for anybody?
I think I had a pretty
not like the narrative that we got from Buttrick's journal, but like a good baseline for what the Trail of Tears was, like what happened along it. I mean, I never saw the sites or anything, but I think what really clicked for me was like seeing the actual names of my family. Like that made it personal whenever, we got our genealogy back and we actually saw the connection. And I know like Courtney, was the descendant from Nancy Ward, so she actually got to like see exactly where, her family members were. And like I think that part, like making that connection, like if you don't have that that background with understanding the Trail of Tears, like if you come in, and all you read was a textbook, then I really think that's like the part that just kind of does it in for you and just makes everything process. At least it was for me.
Thank you all for sharing that. This we should keep moving. So is it 7:15? I thought we were going to be done at 7. Very sorry for your Friday nights. I'll try to wrap it up or move along here. So I asked this question about in-community microaggressions because during the focus group, someone said that they didn't feel very Cherokee. People made comments about them being light-skinned, so it was like other Cherokees were judging Cherokees about their Cherokee-ness, but it actually nothing significant ever played out one way or the other.
Is it community just like just Cherokees or like other tribes?
I
hate when I get into like I went to a gathering of nations or whatever, and then oh you're Cherokee, everybody's Cherokee. Like just kind of alright, whatever.
Yeah.
I know before the ride and stuff, like I would think, I thought it was unfair that like people that weren't as Cherokee as me got just what I got, and it was on the ride when I learned all that stuff. Like if you're any Cherokee, you're Cherokee. It doesn't matter. Blood quantum doesn't matter. All that. And that's what it taught me. But before, I was ignorant about it all. Like I didn't know much. I didn't grow up around it, so I felt that way. But when we were taught, that's how Cherokee. That's how we are. I don't know. It changed my whole opinion on all of it. So I think a lot of people are just ignorant about it, I guess, technically.
Yeah. To answer your question, it is kind of intertribal. It's not just Cherokee. So being asked to prove your Indianness, other natives stating that you don't look or act Indian, a native person telling you that his or her community is better or more native than yours.
Very true.
And it was weird. It was a couple of months ago. I've never been told I don't look native. And I had a girl tell me, she's like, you look Puerto Rican. You don't look, I didn't know that you were Cherokee. And I've never had that before. It offended me so bad. I was like, how? I was like, okay, I've never had that before. That's all I said, and I just walked off. But then I was like, wow. I was at work.
Really?
A girl at work told me, she's like, I thought you were like Puerto Rican. I didn't know you were actually Cherokee or native or anything. I was like, wow. I guess I know how like lighter skinned people feel that are Cherokee. Like. I was like, so offended.
The Tulsa airport, and the person taking my ticket was like, "You're Puerto Rican." I'm like, "No." And then I explained, and he's like, "No, you're Puerto Rican." I'm like, "Okay."
Like, wow. I didn't fight with her. I just was like, whoa. No, I've never gotten that before. That's all I said.
Yeah.
And I just walked off. I was like, I cannot believe she said that. Like,
There's an in-community microaggression you
and
experienced.
it sounded so rude, though. Like, I was just, oh. So, I don't know. I've just noticed things more and more.
Even crazier when you leave like the confines of Cherokee County or northeast Oklahoma, when you go other places, and it bumps up drastically. How many people know about natives or how much
Really try to guess your tribe.
Yeah.
I've been called Hawaiian before. I had a flowery shirt on though.
I feel like that's even worse.
But I have people when I was at Hastings, like in my clinicals, like people come in and just say, you don't look Cherokee, but you look Native. You look like Plains Indians, but you don't look Cherokee. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, what do you say to that? You know, like.
A lot of experts
Right?
running around.
Yeah, I'm like, what makes
A lot of experts running around.
Yeah, there really is. Everyone's judging these days.
Okay, so there's for discrimination, something happened in the middle where it wasn't significant, but essentially people experience discrimination less. So it's kind of, again, with that microaggression, historical trauma, discrimination, it seems like something about the program made people a little bit more resilient. I'm sure discrimination happened at the same rate. You know, nothing like changed in the universe, possibly even more, if we had to guess in any direction. But people were perceiving less discrimination in their lives. And you talked a little bit about maybe why you thought that would be. I don't know if anyone has any other.
I mean, it also has the potential to change your friend group too. We started hanging out. I started hanging out.
Did you cut out some people?
Not that I cut out people, but I just hung out with other people more too. So I'm just saying, like, I don't know that it was constant. You know, I do think there's a factor that you might hang out with.
Change your social group to people that this wouldn't happen as often, possibly.
Potentially, yeah.
That's a good point.
Only when you're spending your weekends riding a bike, you're not hanging out with people as much. I don't know, probably a little more isolated.
I think last time there was a little bit more around PTSD, which is things, we asked this question because we know Native youth experience PTSD more, and it has some components of depression and anxiety. Things like, have you experienced anything kind of frightening, horrible, upsetting, and then you've ever felt numb, detached, or had nightmares, for example? There's actually only 5 questions. It's a small screen. There's larger ones, and even with that, there's one arrow going down. So essentially, compared to the baseline to when people returned, they had less of these symptoms, but it didn't hold up 6 months later.
This is really interesting. PTSD and social trauma at the same time are going
Yeah.
Significantly perceiving or feeling more social traumas at the same time, less post-traumatic stress. Really.
Absolutely.
What would be the cause of the PTSD?
So, well, it's a baseline compared to when you return. So whatever things that someone brought into the ride, yeah, is most likely what we're talking about.
Was that like with the questions, like have you ever experienced, like physical harm within the past whatever months? Was like kind of like that?
That was ACEs, I believe. A physical harm question.
Yeah.
So the PTSD, it didn't have you specify for this particular question. Didn't have you specify, what exactly has happened. It's just said, have you experienced something really frightening and really horrible?
Okay.
And from that, did you have any of these experiences, like feeling on guard, feeling numb or detached, those kinds of things? Yeah, so this historical trauma stuff is really interesting because we don't want it to happen, but how are you going to teach about our history without having more thoughts about historical trauma? And it seems like even though that's going up, everything else as far as mental health is actually improving. So RTR is doing something right, you know. Okay, let me keep moving here. So then there was social and cultural. I'll just move on. I won't let you guys guess unless you really want to guess. So there wasn't as much going on here, but you know, there was increased social support, but kind of like you guys talked about, 6 months later, it wasn't there, and it felt like it wasn't there, according to this. Family conflict, nothing really ever panned out, even though in the focus groups people talked about getting along with their family better when they returned, but nothing really happened one way or the other. I did ask a little bit about Cherokee language, interest and use, and when people returned, compared to the baseline, is when they felt like they wanted to learn more and use more Cherokee, but that also didn't keep up 6 months later. There's these questions like about traditional cultural activities. They're kind of like, this is what's used most often when people ask, but these are kind of like do you play marbles? Do you make baskets? And you know, someone could be very quote unquote traditional and not actually do any of these things. So I asked a lot of different questions because it's very hard to gauge someone's culture. So the traditional culture activities didn't do anything, and I'm not really surprised, but it is what people use the most in literature. Again, the list is like, do you sing Cherokee songs? Do you cure and tan hides? Do you gather wild onions? Do you listen to elders tell stories? That kind of thing. And then there was this Cherokee identity, and we talked about this last year. There was these 2 questions I asked about Cherokee identity, and so the first one, that there was no change. There was questions like, wait a minute. Okay. I feel a bond with other Cherokee people. I'm glad to be Cherokee. Being Cherokee makes me happy. We talked about this last year. They seem like, I've never heard anyone actually say those words. Like, being Cherokee makes me happy. And what was another one? I think Cherokee people have a lot to be proud of. I remember people kind of saying these are kind of like kitschy things, like that just doesn't feel authentic. So apparently that was reflected. That's that Cherokee identity belief. It wasn't a good measure. It turned out not to be helpful. But the next one was things like, I spend time trying to find out about my Cherokee heritage. I have a strong sense of belonging to my tribe. I understand pretty well what tribal membership means to me. I've done things that will help me understand my role and practices as a Cherokee. I feel strong attachment to my Cherokee community, ancestors, and future generations, and I have a responsibility to future Cherokee generations. So that changed, and that was pretty powerful all throughout. Then we compared, so there was these Cherokee Nation community values. You see them at your, on a list at any of your community centers usually. Those are the, look out for one another, watch, be watchful, wait for one another, be stingy with one another, like a mother to a child, and your gadoogies in there too, and all those, and I'm talking, does everyone know that kind of list of Cherokee community values? So from baseline to before the ride, not much change, but from baseline to when y'all returned, you felt you believed in those values more, but it didn't hold up 6 months later. And for Eastern Band, they came together. So the Cherokee Nation ones are supposedly, some of the Smith family ended up writing them down, but the values come from like the grounds, like the values that people are supposed to uphold at our grounds. The Eastern Band came together and they had some elders, and they created 7 particular values that you can see online, like humor, respecting elders. So that one ended up not panning out, not changing much. Any thoughts about this? Anything you see here?
I kind of think the one
one that's like pre-training follow-up, like the 6-month one, that's kind of where we need to step up as like people that have done it in the past and bridge that gap between the people that have just recently done it and talk to them more and include them, because it can be really scary just coming into a whole new group of people that, yes, you share the same things with them, but you might not know them. And so just bridging that gap and giving them someone to talk to about what they've experienced, I feel like that could increase that last benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
Which category did the question like? There was a question that was like, I feel like, I can make change in my community or something like that. Where did that fall? Or like, I feel like my input. Yeah, that's what I would have thought, but she didn't say.
Which one do you think it is?
Cherokee action knowledge. Or identity action. But it was something along the lines of what?
There was actually one that was just completely by itself, and it said when you think of the next several generations. Oh nope, that's not it. Sorry, give me 1 second.
It's okay.
I can't see it. I think it was that. Let's see. I have a responsibility to give back to my community. I know where I come from and feel confident in transmitting this knowledge to my children. That's all that action and knowledge one. I'd have to maybe look a little further.
That's okay, yeah. I was just wondering.
Okay, so that's all of the results except for like right before I came in, my statistician sent me other things, but we're not going to talk about it. Because
Melissa,
what's that?
just real quick,
yeah.
regarding the Cherokee language section there.
Yes.
This year, I think it gets better every year as far as the language goes, including the language in the program. This year, Sarah and Marie's one of the mentor writers, have incorporated using Cherokee for all the signals on the road. Instead of saying car front, or they say Dictulan, which is Cherokee, yeah, big eyes for car. Or if there's a car back, they say Onti, you know, they just say back. And so things like that. So all of their signals are in Cherokee now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was like,
We tried. We just didn't have the resource.
I was saying some of the wrong things except when I rode with him the first time.
I was just like, I don't know what
But I mean, we said like Usti Gutusi. Yeah.
Marvin, you want to say anything?
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Am I?
Kiwanis. Kado.
Yeah.
Kado hadan eh.
I was actually just actual fine.
I can just get over there.
Well, I'm in the back of the house. I don't really care. That's all I got, guys.
The Cherokee language up here was actually 4 questions, and it was, can you understand any spoken Cherokee? Do you speak some? Can you speak fluently? How often is it spoken in your home? So people, this is kind of an action, like people are actually speaking a little bit more after the ride, which maybe that's increasing, like you're saying, well, a good sign, but it's not being kept up like you were talking about. So, I have more results. It would take a lot longer to explain. I'm going to skip through them. We'll do it maybe another time. These are called correlations. And I literally got them right before I came here, and I wanted to explain some of them, but we're skipping them because it's Friday night. And some things, we already did most of the discussion. So I guess I just want to update, and I'll send an email out, but been able to work with Sky, and so we're once again going to present at NSU. I'll do kind of like another Facebook message and, see who's interested in co-presenting, like maybe 4 or 5 other people. It'd be great if the 2018 group could be well represented there. And maybe even 1 or 2 people from Eastern Band would be all right as well. We could maybe help support them too. So I'll send that out. There's maybe 1 more conference that we'll do, maybe out of state. So that's also coming up. If anyone wants to go, it doesn't matter when you participated. And it's just nice to be able, we were able to go to New Zealand once. And it's nice to be able to have a cultural exchange and be able to tell people your story. And I think it meant a lot on both sides. I think you guys have experienced that even here, probably just in Greasy the other day. But it means a lot for other people to hear what things that you've done, you've experienced, and the work that you've done. And it seemed pretty meaningful for the people, the writers that went to learn about another culture and the importance of language for Maoris and lots of other things. So I'm hoping to be able to do that 1 more time. So that's coming up too. I don't think we're going to go to New Zealand, but maybe we'll see where we go. We'll see what conferences we can get into. So 2. Take it all on the rock. There will be 1 or 2 articles that will be published based on what I just showed you. And so I'll continue to let you guys know. And if anyone wants to help write in any way or be a part of that process, you can. There's also a research project that we've kind of talked about with the alumni group where we do a mini RTR, but instead of the removal era, we focus on the allotment era. And instead of traveling from homelands, we'll do travel within the jurisdictional area and still do place-based learning. So we'll know in October if we got approved for that. And if we do, I'm going to be recruiting everyone who's ever done the ride to be leaders and facilitators of this new program.
So people, how will that work? Some of the guys are people applying to learn more, technically, and it's about frontier and we're helping them.
So we're going to have theoretically very similar setup, very similar players. We'll have David Hampton and Wyman and Jack Baker. So people have historical knowledge, but maybe several long weekends instead, kind of more compact. And again, we'll kind of think about. I think a lot of people don't know about the allotment era, and you guys learned a little bit. It sounds like through this program, but it'll be focused on the allotment era and some cultural changes that occurred and some of the kind of governmental policies that were enacted. But because you are all a wealth of knowledge and have done a similar program, to me, you are a natural fit to become leaders for the new one. You would need to do some training yourself, learning a little bit more about the allotment era, learning about how to facilitate. But you actually went through a program to teach you how to be leaders, so it seems like you guys would be perfect to lead. And the group, we don't want to interfere with RTR, so we're focusing on 25 and older. Did that?
I think that's a good idea. I know so many people, especially at Marcoma,
Exactly.
when I go work out, everyone's like, what are the age groups? And they're like, oh, I'm too old.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, you can be a mentor writer, but they're still between that age where it's like, it's going to be a bit, and they're like, they're really bummed about it because they want to learn and they want to,
Yeah.
So that's what I need. Not like that.
Well, cross your fingers. I find out in October if it gets funded. And if it does get funded, we spend an entire year putting the curriculum together. So again, that's a place where I will ask everyone to come together, do things like this, probably have to give people a little bit of a stipend and food to get together once or twice a month and start to think about what was important to you about the ride. How can we translate it? I mean, it might be people walk, they bike, maybe there's even canoeing. It's just going to depend on really, the history of the removal really guides a lot of how the program, but the allotment's a little bit different. So I'm just going to rely on the experts, you guys, historians, to kind of decide what, and people who want to do it. I'm going to kind of get them in on it too. Like, what would you like to see happen? So that's, cross your fingers, find out in October, and let you all know about that. So is there anything else, any questions you all have for me? Anything else I can do? You're looking, anything I can be helpful with? Because this is kind of, unless this other thing happens, I'm kind of, I'm not going to collect any more data. But I'm here to help you guys in any way that you'd like it.
This is like,
Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, do we need to tell like the 2018 for the symposium presentation?
I think I'll put, like I did before, like a little survey, a Google survey on the Facebook page. But if you want to remind people and just let them know, I mean, I'd like to have at least, more than half-ish of the people represented from 2018, but other people from other groups can if they want to.
And that's Friday at 3.
Friday afternoon. I'll have to double check. Yeah. And I'll actually be in Minneapolis, so I'll have to Skype in again.
I'd like to take part of this time just because it's the 35th anniversary. I think 4 times.
Is there anything planned? Is there any reunion? Is there any?
No. We commemorated it on the shirt this year. That's about it so far.
Okay. Maybe a note to people in the room to do something.
On these articles you mentioned, where will they be published?
So, one of them was published in the journal.
It's been published.
The focus groups is that one was in the Journal of American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Research Journal.
Could you share the link to those?
Yeah, it is on the page. I think I posted it about a month ago. There's 2 more in the works from the focus groups, and there'll be 1 or 2 about this, what I just shared with you today. So whenever I hear something, I'll continue. And the first paper, because you and other people in the alumni group looked over the paper, you guys are authors on it. So it says RTR alumni.
I think I'd like to help with the articles.
Okay.
I think that would help if I get into my next step for higher ed. I think that would help.
Awesome. Yeah, Amber helped. Amber Anderson was a co-author in the last one, and it was really nice. So I'm around this summer, and so what we did was we did weekly or every other week meetings at the library, and that's how we wrote it. So maybe that's another thing I can just share with the group. Like, if you want to come and help write this paper, this is where and when we'll be meeting to do it. Oh,
The conference for it.
the NSU, it's Friday, April 11th, 12th.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay, I should know that. I think I've seen something about it.
Gotta go. All right. I'm gonna
Turn that off. I don't know. Did anyone join us from Eastern Band?
Well, the stream didn't work.
Oh, it didn't.
But he's getting